And then now we are going to the next segment. Before entering the presentation segment of 5 amazing speakers who have spent their time with us in the event how to bring Keris to the world. Before we begin, I would like to briefly introduce you to the speaker. First, Dr. Peter Kremser. I hope my pronunciation is right. Peter Kremser, born 1945 in Linz, Austria. Peter Kremser is working in business and project development, living a long time in Indonesia. He is a collector of Keris and long-time connection to the Keris lover around the world. And then Peter Kremser will can presentation about the origin of Keris brojol, hypothesis, and esoteric, right?
Yeah.
Mr. Peter, Dr. Peter Kremser, what time our welcome?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you so much. My name is Peter Kremser. I'm coming from Austria, and I'm collecting already Keris for many, many years. And of course, as an Austrian, we have an approach from outside, and this I would like basically as hypothesis bringing to you. Compliment, great applause to the one who has basically designed the words humanity and peace. Why? Because especially in our times, we see this essentially and very, very important. And second, I would like to take you for a travel to around the world and to give you maybe a little bit impression that humanity is around the world. It is not a special point for any country, but Indonesia, in my view, contributes a lot. And one of the contribution is so basically the World Heritage, the Keris. Now, I put my presentation into 3 parts and guide you in the middle of Africa, far away. And I want to tell you a small story, what was told in the caravans in Sudan. The story was brought up and written down from an Austrian professor Frobenius, who has listened very carefully. The story goes over the country of Kush, which is basically a very, very rich kingdom, and suddenly disappears. The reason of the disappearance is the center of the story. In this Kush, in this country, it was basically thousands of years ago, very rich, very prosperous. And there was a habit that the kings basically had to be sacrificed according to a period which he was living in. The priests were looking in the stars, and the stars in a special star constellation. Basically, they decided that the king has to be sacrificed. At this time, basically, the priests were starting up according to the cosmos constellation that the king has to be sacrificed. And to make this long story short, because we have not too much time, it was so that this was a king who wouldn't like to die and to be sacrificed. And basically, the story is that there was a speaker who was speaking so wonderful that everybody was sleeping and listening. And it was going so for 6 days on, and at the end of the 6 days, the priests have not seen anymore the constellation of the cosmos, and they could not anymore decide that they have it was the right time to sacrifice the king. What is interesting for us that this king sacrification is going until to Indonesia. It is basically a map where all the old culture had this. Now it comes to the center of my story, that one of the part of the origin of the quiz was basically, if I understand it, to sacrifice somebody and to make the country more prosperous, more peaceful, and from the cosmos ideology to bring basically the world in order again. So over centuries, this had been done, and step by step it has been changed into an ox or into a bull. And we have still, for example, in Burma, the Nagas, which is basically sacrificing the bull. And I do not know if this has happened in Indonesia, but it is basically for sure in the same area where the Dongsong culture had been. To come into the center of the story, years ago, I have found a small, you see it, a small kuching. Now, I was told, and I was reading in the literature, that the sacrificing of the bull was a kind of fertility to bring it to the fields, and the boys of the villages were basically invited, and after a special signal, the bull was parted into pieces, and every guy was bringing a piece of meat, so basically in the villages. Now here it is started that I was thinking this small kuti, or what you, if you see it, was one of such instrument what the young boys were carrying to take a meat out of the sacrificed bull, right? Because basically, if you see this, you could not hurt somebody. Basically, you have a kind of, you see this? You have a kind of a ganja, which is basically rectangular. And my dressmaker, Sohajo, who was living in my house, was making this as a okiran, basically, in the idea how it was. But if you hold it, it is a kind of a possibility to cut very, very easily. Now, you see here already the asymmetry. And the interesting thing is that this piece of meat has been brought for sure to the leader of the village, and the village was cutting then the piece in many parts, and every part has to be brought into the meadows or into the rice fields to become prosperous. So sooner or later, and I say, please, this is a hypothesis, yeah, it's not something where I say it is so, but it is a hypothesis. So the village leader was cutting basically the meat, and out of this, I think would come basically a form like this. This is basically a kind of a form which could be the original part of a place, to be the shelter and the protection of the house. So out of that, basically, this was found in the river Brantas. You see, it's basically a special ivory. And so you have basically here is basically the special part of the place. And out of that, I believe that the old Javanese were developing then a kind of device. This is not the metal, but this is a typical form where you have basically from the former empu, if we can say empu, it is tin or something. I never have seen this. I bought it, by the way, in Surabaya. And but you see here the typical pitching, so basically where we are pitching with the hand, basically the grease, which is again a sacrifice. Yeah, it is not the super happiness to make it, but to put something in to the grease for I give something and I get something. On the top of the ganja, you have so basically a praying person, which could be a kind of a symbol of serving the master and giving luck and protection. So basically out of that could be derivated the different krisis, of course, then later on for protection, for fight. Then we had to recognize that over the centuries, the human being is ready for fashion. That means if you see Rajaguna or the best quiz makers, Setayu for the defense, you have so basically a highly value in handicraft and work, but we have also basically, and this comes back to my startup, the sacrification, the having a protection, the EMPU is making a protection basically for humanity and peace. And this is my short information what I would like to bring to you. And in my view, there are many theories, and maybe one of these theories is also a new theory which is coming here. Thank you so much for the presentation.